Penguin Random House Audio presents A Resistance of Witches, a novel by Morgan Ryan. Read for you by Grace Gray. For Matt, who held the door open long enough for me to walk through. The High Priestess. 1. London, November 1940. Years later, when Lydia recalled that day at Downing Street, she would often find herself thinking about the door. It was an ordinary door in almost every respect, if unusually beautiful. Glossy black, with a sheen so high she could nearly see her reflection. Gleaming brass mail slot, iron knocker. The number 10 painted with the 0 at a slightly whimsical tilt. And yet, to Lydia, there was something enchanted about it as well. In hindsight, she would think that perhaps it was because in all the stories, passing through a magical door was a rite of passage. The black and white partition where one's old life ends and a newer, stranger one begins. It was a chilly day in London, the coldest they'd had since March, and an icy mist fell across the paving stones like lace. Lydia would forever remember the way her jacket itched at the back of her neck, how her stomach twisted into knots as she stole a glance at the woman beside her. Isadora Good, her mentor of just 2 weeks. She watched in fascination as the frozen raindrops twisted away from Isadora's form just before impact, as if each one had considered the cost of the collision and then thought better of it. Isadora reached out and rapped the knocker, hard. 1, 2, 3. The face Isadora wore that day was 34. 34, she had informed her young charge, was exactly old enough to be taken seriously, but still young enough to be interesting. Lydia was 16 and 2 weeks, and wore her face exactly as it was. By graduation, she would master the art of glamouring her features, making herself appear pink-cheeked and button-nosed, a sweet rose of a girl like so many of her classmates, instead of skinny, pale and hawkish. She would wear her glamour daily, the way some women wear lipstick. Soon. Very soon. But not yet. A butler opened the glossy black door and peered at the 2 women. "Miss Isadora Good and Miss Lydia Polk, to see the Prime Minister," Isadora said briskly. The butler scowled. "I'm afraid the ladies do not have an appointment." Lydia watched as Isadora pulled a mother-of-pearl case from the pocket of her peacock-blue overcoat, and from the case, a card. It was inky black and bore no name, just a single inscrutable symbol embossed in gold. "I believe you must be mistaken," she said. The butler blinked at the card, then back up at the 2 women in the doorway. He appeared momentarily confused, then seemed to remember himself. "Yes, of course. The Prime Minister has been expecting you." He looked surprised as the words fell out of his mouth, as if they'd been spoken by someone else. When she thought back on that day, Lydia recalled that there had been a change in the air as she passed over that threshold. A prickling of the skin. A sensation of falling, like Alice down the rabbit hole. Funny, as the place didn't look like anything very special to her. She'd expected glittering crystal chandeliers and tall, light-filled rooms, something like the Great Hall of the Academy, only grander. Instead, it was rather drab and smelled of cigars. The windows had been fitted with blast-proof shutters that blocked out the light, and there was an abandoned quality about the place. Above her head, the electric candlesticks in the light fixture gave off a faint hum. "Miss Polk, do stop goggling." Isadora frowned as the butler disappeared with their coats. Lydia quickly turned her attention to her shoes. They were cobalt blue suede, and already beginning to bite into her ankles.
Isadora good."
Lydia looked up again, to see a rotund man approaching them at a swift pace. Isidora's face broke into a perfectly arranged expression of joy.
"Winston!"
Isadora embraced the older man, kissing him once on each cheek.
"My God! How long has it been?"
"Too long." Isadora smiled warmly. He looked extremely old to Lydia. Older than he had appeared in the black and white newspaper photographs she'd seen of him before that day. He was jowly, with thinning hair, and wore excellent clothes that somehow managed to look rumpled on his round frame. Still, his eyes were a shocking shade of blue, and there was a sharpness there that Lydia liked. The Prime Minister's brow furrowed as he took in Isidora's face.
"Why, it must be more than 30 years. But you look... Why, you're... Winston, you embarrass me."
Isadora laughed softly. Lydia didn't think Isadora looked embarrassed at all.
"Please allow me to introduce my apprentice, Miss Lydia Polk. Lydia Polk, Mr. Winston Churchill."
Lydia curtsied. "Prime Minister?"
"Charmed, Miss Polk."
Churchill leaned over and took Lydia's hand, bringing it to his lips.
"Now, what brings two such lovely creatures to call on a tired old man?"
"I'm afraid this isn't a social visit," Isadora murmured, and Churchill nodded gravely.
"May we speak privately?" "Of course."
Churchill gestured for Isadora to come with him. Lydia began to follow until Isadora stopped her with a sharp look.
"Lydia, stay here."
With that, Isadora and the Prime Minister disappeared into another room, leaving Lydia behind. She stood alone, feeling awkward and insignificant without Isadora by her side. The walls were bare, with only empty nails and ghostly outlines to suggest the art that had been hastily taken down and carted away in the wake of the Blitz. Rain pattered on the shutters, too loud in the cavernous silence. After a moment of fidgeting, Lydia sighed and seated herself in a hard, high-backed chair against the wall. She thought she heard the tinkle of Isadora's familiar laughter, but she couldn't make out any words. Why bring me along only to have me wait outside? She wondered, irritably. Then an idea occurred to her. She would be in terrible trouble if she were caught. But projection was her strongest subject. She felt sure she could manage without being detected. Lydia chose a spot on the wall upon which to fix her gaze and allowed her eyes to relax. Her breathing slowed. If the butler had walked by, he might have thought she was extremely deep in thought, or perhaps a little odd, but he did not appear. She waited until her body began to feel heavy, almost as if it was sinking into the floor, and then, very quickly, she stood. When she turned around, she saw herself sitting in her chair with a far-off look on her face. She hated seeing herself like that, even more than she hated looking at herself in the mirror. In the mirror, she could arrange her face in a way that would minimize its flaws, turn up the corners of her lips to make herself look softer, although not necessarily prettier. Now that she'd stepped outside of herself, her face had gone slack, mouth turned down, eyes fixed on nothing. She resisted the impulse to reach out and fuss with her hair. Isadora's laughter rang out again. Leaving her body where it sat, Lydia followed the sound, walking unseen past room after empty room, noticing the deep marks left in the plush carpets where desks and chairs had once been, until she heard Isadora's voice again, coming from just behind a set of heavy wooden doors. She took a breath and stepped through, bracing herself against the uncomfortable way the matter tugged at her as she slipped through to the other side. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was furnished, with shelves of books lining the walls and an enormous mahogany table running the length of the room. Churchill and Isadora were seated at one end of the table, their bodies angled toward one another. Church.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?